found the project. It's been a little over a week, unfortunately, because my AC broke. But today I figured we'd pick up where we left off and refactor some of these components that we've been working on for the actions list. I think the last problem we left off with was we created this async storage service. And it's just a little odd in this component that we need to store, then get, and then set. We're basically using the storage service to store, storage service to get the latest version, and then setting the component state to pass down. Definitely room to refactor there, so we can just jump right into it. Get the project started. Let's start the simulator. And this is also the first run on this new laptop, so hopefully it goes a little bit faster than it has in the past. I posted another video a couple days ago, just getting this new MacBook Air set up for development. I get the sense the React Native CLI for starting the iOS simulator. I think it's just a slow step in general at first. Opening it from Xcode might be a little bit faster, but maybe time to compare it some other day. We'll kind of set it up nicely on our screen. Just kind of have a nice 2/3 split for everything. Actually, I want to do a vertical split. I think that'll be easier. Easier to read. Just restart the Metro Bundler. So I think where we left off, if we look at our component tree here, we've got our entry points in the application, which is rendering action input. Action input has state for a new action and a setter, and then the entire actions data object, basically, and a setter for that. And on mount, we attempt to get the data from async storage, and if it exists, we set that data. Otherwise, we just provide this initial actions object. So our actions are keyed by their currently sequential ID, and then each one has a title, a status, and an edit mode. Don't know how crazy I am about that structure. But moving on for now, we have a handle add action. Validation, create a sequential ID, create a new object, store it in async storage. Then get async storage the entirety of the object, which in reality should be this, since we've just set it, nothing else really should be setting it. But then we're resetting the component state and then resetting the action field. And then this is just toggling the status for completion for a specific action. This one's just toggling the edit mode for an action. And then this one is saving an edit. So you could see it's getting a little complicated. This is just the input field that we use to add an action. This is just the button to add that action from that input field, and then this is the list of available actions to display. Should be almost there with the application running on the simulator. An actions list basically iterates over the actions list that's provided to it and renders an action item for each one. And then the action item itself has this concept of a draft state, so it can edit contained to its own component, and we're able to on press save the draft of that action. I think what makes the most sense to me right now is to refactor this to have some separation of data concerns and have like a container component that communicates exclusively with async storage service for now, and passes that data down as props to a presentational component. So I think we can just make a new file right now. Action container. We're just going to start making everything TypeScript by default, because why not? Just to throw something in there for now, and then export default action container. So basically taking this action input and we want to have it basically deal with the async storage exclusively. We don't want anything below that to have to think about async storage. So it will be responsible for providing the actions data. I think we can kind of copy this for now. Import that. Okay, so on mount, we want to get the data from async storage. If it doesn't exist, provide this default stuff. Yeah, next time I'm going to try running it from Xcode because I think it's just faster from Xcode. But at least we started to make progress while we were doing that. All right, so that's our first concern right there, is that we have loaded the initial data, but when we add, we're using async storage. Interestingly, this is funny. I mean, it kind of goes to show the need for refactoring because in all of these other handlers, we're not actually interacting with async storage, so any of these changes were not actually persisting. Adding persisted. We could fix this warning another time. I'm trying to think how this would work. So if we added, we're going to provide basically this exact same function. We store the data. Then how do we tell the container to get the new storage service data and pass it down as a prop? Because that's basically what we're going to do is like something like this. Um, the naming convention is going to have to change too because like this action input has become so much more. I suppose we could call it like action view for now. Uh, that's effectively what we want to do is pass down this actions data and just ensure that it's always up to date. So it's basically going to need these in a Redux world like dispatchable actions, but I don't want to do Redux right now. It's a lot of boilerplate to get started with this, and you know the models are still evolving, so it's a bit premature, I think. But you know might be added in the future. Yeah, the styles are okay in there. Could basically call this one an action view. Which is really just like a container of action components, but not a data container like a presentational container. Well, suppose we could add this add first. Won't need a style sheet for this. We should also provide the ID in the object, even though we're keying by the ID. We should store the data and then this is, yeah, it's returning void. And this doesn't actually return anything. It does accept an optional callback function that we could use. The callback seems to just provide an error. At the very least, it's like, you know, we're storing this data. If anything, I think like the new state looks like this. So we are just storing new state. I don't think we need to read again, but we could just take that value and also write to there. Does that make sense? Or do we write to there and then on any change to actions in an effect, we store it? That's probably better, I think. I'm not sure why this is a problem. Actions is an object. It's not a type string. It expects an array of numbers, and it's getting an array of strings. I see. Um, the thing is, we don't even need this right now. Length is going to give us the same value. Since everything's sequential, I mean, I think we can say that in the future we want a more robust ID assignment. Um, but I think that's pretty deep down the line when we start to actually integrate some sort of service layer, storage layer, like outside of just the UI. So we want it to rerun definitely when actions change. And we basically just say, um, almost the equivalent of the above. Where we want to await async storage service store data actions. That's that. So we're just persisting. You can say persist actions data in component state to async storage. And this one is basically saying fetch actions data from async storage on mount, else use defaults. It's pretty safe. We actually don't need to store here. Okay. This is starting to come together a little bit, I think. I think we can safely rename this because it's evolved well beyond its initial scope. It's now an action view. We can begin removing some of this. I don't think this is used anywhere else. Yep, that's it. So we can, from action view, get rid of that. We can get rid of this too. We're going to receive actions and handle add action as props. So we actually don't get this setter at all. This is scoped to that though, and this almost could be an action input component by itself. So action container will actually return action view, handle add action, sees handle add action. Coming along. Not sure why it's not displaying anything. Undefined is not an object. Actions list in actions list. It's receiving undefined. And that's getting passed down. This prop it should be providing a default value of an empty object, I would think. opportunity to debug to see what's going on, because that shouldn't be the case, I would think. It's like the initial state of it is nothing. But we could add a breakpoint here just to see what's actually provided. Interesting. I almost think to refresh this. Oh, there was an S in there. Okay, action list. Reload. It is receiving undefined. Interesting that it's not loading. Oh. Doi! That's because we're still rendering action input, but we're just bypassing the action container. And the import wasn't even right. That should make it better. Let's see. Yes, it's getting an empty object, so it doesn't break on that line. Okay, this seems promising. Cool. So we've got that working. Now, let's see, action container. It does have this handle add. It cares about this state right now, which I think it should just be provided to it instead of this maintaining its own state for it. New action right now is just an object we need to provide. Or no, right now it's a string. We do need to provide some types for the elements that we're working with, but we'll get there. And I think this should, return a promise once it's done. So what we're saying is add it as long as there is an alert or an action in the field. Create a new ID. Set the container's state to this. Right now there actually is no asynchronous behavior. So we could almost say just void, but once it's returned, And then when we actually call it from here, handle add action, we need to provide this to it. Where this is saying add action. And then we want to say once it's done. I don't know if this is, yeah, set actions isn't asynchronous. I'm just wondering if this would have any adverse cases. What? Well, we do want to. I think it should return a Boolean. Failed validation. Oh, this is tricky for me. 8:30 in the morning. Coffee is not kicked in. Jeez. Yeah, because like if it threw an error, it could throw an error. This could catch it. Something like that. Try the act of adding the action. And you say throw error, please add whatever this is. Please enter some text first. And here we actually alert that error. Something like that. Otherwise, we know that it completed. Uh, yeah, something like that. So I think we would actually be able to say this, add action. Does this work? Testing, add. New add. Aha, we got a problem with our sequential ID behavior. Because if you think about this, we've got 2 keys in the actions list. So the length of that should be 2, I would think. But let's see. Sequential ID that's generated. Not sure what that is. Sequential ID is 2. Oh, the problem is it's not a zero-based index for these IDs. We actually need to increment it by 1, which is why I was doing this before instead of this. But I think just doing a +1 will serve our purposes for now. Yeah, we can add some breakpoints just to see what's happening. Make sure that it's going as expected. See if the error throws. We'll see if it returns. I think we need to reload this to get our source maps the way we want. There we go. That was just if you reload the Metro Bundler, you can actually set breakpoints on lines that you've modified since the last run. Um, so yeah, we'll see if we try and click this, it's going to throw that error. We should get an alert. Oof. Something is not going well. Throw an error. Is it catching it? Let's see that again. Oh, it's like trying to alert an object or like an error um, with a message in a stack rather than. I think I also need to do like throw new error, but probably that error seems like whatever data is going over the React Native bridge is not expected. But if we did throw new error with a string, yeah, we actually just need to. Oops. Yep, and I just closed the emulator or the simulator. Perfect chance to test out the Xcode speed. Open up the iOS directory. I believe I have a simulator open already, or downloaded. So hopefully it's not too long, but I think we can carry on. Because here, we basically just want to say error. Build succeeded. Where's the simulator? There we go. Okay. So a little slow going at first, but effectively now we still need to do it with these other handlers, but the action view no longer cares about the source of the data or no longer interfaces with the data service in any way. That responsibility is entirely handled by the container. Um, in fact, some of this validation, like if this were a Redux application, we would dispatch, add action. Some of the business logic would exist in there. So, it might be good to separate out this business logic too and really keep the responsibility of the container limited to, you're interfacing with the storage service. Yeah, even this is kind of handling several things at once. But let's see if this part works at least. And this is just a continuous process refactoring. Cool. So at least we know that that part worked. And we can say if we add a new action, that works. If we reload, it persisted. So working. Still not great, I don't think, but I think a worthwhile improvement to start splitting this out. Yeah, and we can start to do these, I guess. I think that'll be a good place to leave off, is if we can migrate these over to the container to handle completion, editing, and saving. At least we've migrated that out. And frankly, I mean, these weren't even communicating with the data um, service layer to begin with, but yeah, we can take it one by one. Handle action completion. ID, I believe, is a string. Um, since objects in JavaScript are generally, I think, always strings. And this is setting the action state. I think what will be curious is I don't think this does like deep equality. So this is creating a brand new object. This is toggling an existing object. So I wonder if it will persist that. This isn't liking this because actions is technically an empty object. I think we can just throw up a quick interface to say, like, this is this ID string the action. It has an ID, which is a string or maybe even a number. When it's actually in the object, it has a title, which is a string, has a status, which let's just bust out a completion status. Complete or incomplete, basically. So that'll be one of those, and then edit mode, which is a Boolean for now, which we can obviously improve upon. Actions data. Is that? I think this is how we provide the type. Yeah, this will be tricky too because we're going to need to like perform some sort of generic to validate the return type from here. But I think for now, um, might not be an easy way to get around that for the moment. But we can convert this to use the enum, which just looking at this, I'm not happy about it. But as I keep saying, it's a continuous process to improve this. It doesn't like this because get data is returning a generic object rather than the actions data object. Um, so, I mean, that, see, like it satisfies one but not the other. Um, all right, maybe we can just provide, it's in TypeScript already, so why not? I'm not sure how we can provide. Let's see what the TypeScript docs have to say. I'm just not sure the syntax when it's a function. The function is like an object key. Maybe it's just that. I think that might have just done it. Damn. Argument of type. It's not assignable to parameter of type. Oh, I think this is now upset about initial actions, which is actions data to begin with. Okay, I think we're nearing getting this right. Throw these types higher up. It doesn't get upset about using them before defining them. And these are expecting an ID. All right, I think we just solved it. Basically, sorry, I wasn't talking out loud while I was doing this. Async storage service get data. We just provided what's called a generic in TypeScript and in other statically typed languages. Here we're just calling it T, but we can use it to define the return type to say, whatever type we've provided to this function or method, um, you can say that we're returning the same type um, when the promise is resolved. Um, and it's extending an object because it needs to have some baseline of like what kind of data you're dealing with. So we know it's an object. T is basically just a more specific object. So then in here, we're able to define that what the generic is. So we're saying, okay, we're expecting actions data from this, which right now is all the service really does. But eventually, we could provide a storage key, um, and then it actually gets a different data set based on the argument provided. And that's where that will become more valuable because we can basically get goals or reviews or actions depending on what component we're using in the app, and we can define the return type so we can interact with it in TypeScript. We'll know what we're actually doing. So that was pretty good. I want to commit that specifically. We'll address that later. We'll say improve, add generic types to async storage service get data. All right, actions list. Check the render method. I don't know why it's completely erroring though. Okay, I guess it was just providing a key, which is the way it was before. But anyway, all right, we've created this container, which we've started to migrate some of these handlers over. We've renamed this. And then actions list, we've provided a key. Safe to commit that. Fix, provide key for each action item in action list. Then we could say rename action input to action view to reflect expanded functionality. And then, okay, we've added an action container. Add action container to handle communication with data layer exclusively. We're going to push this. Pushing everything to master right now because nobody's using this other than me. We can come up with a branching strategy later. Yeah, so it's 9:05. I've got to actually go to work now. So I think this is a decent enough place to leave off. We can maybe get rid of this import as well. Hey, we created some types, which is great. Didn't expect to do it, but it kind of happened out of necessity today. We've created this action container and migrated 1.5 actions since this one isn't actually being used yet. So we can leave off here and say left off here, need to provide this as a prop and confirm it works. Next time, convert remaining handlers to be provided from action container. Yeah, so I think that's a good place to leave off today. Um, may not look like much since functionally the app is the same as where we left off last time, but this will make it a lot easier to test our components where we're separating responsibility. The action container has the data and the data communication, and the action view is just uh, receiving that data and rendering based on what is provided. Um, so we'll see eventually these will be much smaller and much more alike to this add action function. Um, yeah, and then I think that's a good place to leave off. Next piece of functionality I think would be to like delete a to-do item, perhaps. Um, and then it's not perfect, but it's getting pretty close to where um, I might start to consider navigation and being able to switch between, like say, goals, actions, and reviews. So the navigation layer will be an interesting problem to solve as well. So yeah, good session today, and yeah, I'll see you all next time.